Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Colin Corby. And he's an entrepreneur. He's the Digital Detox Coach. And today's talk is going to be all about digital entrepreneurship, productivity, and it's going to be a fascinating conversation. I'm really happy to welcome Colin to the show. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm very pleased to be here.
Yeah, you're out. I also forgot to mention you're also a TEDx speaker and also a leadership, well-being, and the mindset coach. So we'll talk about all of the work that you've been doing and talk about the how you got started and your background and your experience that led you to do what you do now.
There's a bit of a sort of a long lead time. When I was in my mid-30s, I had a fantastic job. I've always worked in technology. But I started to suffer from stress. And in fact, I passed out a few times at work. And usual tests, no, nothing there. So I decided to get fit again. And I found that exercise was, and the fact that the heart rate can go up and down and all those sorts of things enabled me to manage stress. But I sort of got the bug. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then I went on to see how far I could push the exercise. And I ended up doing 4 Ironmen. And actually, this year's challenge is to swim Lake Windermere, which is 10 and a half miles or to 11 miles. It's the longest lake in England. But during that process, I sort of got into mindset and the power of mindset. And then about 10 years ago, I had an opportunity of sort of leaving the technology world and sort of rethinking. And on the one hand, I love technology. But on the other hand, I know how it's messing with our minds and everything to do with that. And I love the mindset. And so I brought all of these things together and I created the Digital Detox Coach in 2018 because it was fairly clear to me that we were spending far too much time online and it was having consequences for the rest of our life. That's how it all came together.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've always found inspiration from athletes. They're entrepreneurs in their own right. They're kind of human performance, and I love this intersection between mindset and coaching and how you can translate those lessons learned from athletes and high performers into business technology. So, one question I have is, you have this intersection of technology and mindset, and explore the relationship between tech and psychology, how it affects our health, thinking, social dynamics, and how we can use it to increase our mental well-being.
The intersection with psychology is great because our smartphones, I sort of use a comparison. If you love chocolate, really, our smartphones are like a bar of chocolate, but they're more than a bar of chocolate, and you carry it around with you. So you're always tempted by this bar of chocolate. But it's a refillable bar of chocolate, so you can never eat it. You can always consume more and more and more. It sort of matches our psychology because we like new and interesting things. We like immediate gratification. We like to be busy, and we like the feeling of being connected. But whether we are or not is another question. So they're fantastic, and I know there's been lots of great talks about the way that psychology is being used in marketing, but never before have we carried it around with us. And it's so we're all of us, including myself, impacted by the skills that they're able to use. Now, of course, they've got to be good products anyway. But they sort of, you go there. I love to look at the weather because I'm in the UK. You go there, I want to look at the weather. Well, before I've even got there, I'm checking my emails, I'm looking at my, social media apps, I'm doing this, that, and the other. And quite often you forget what you go in there for. But it consumes so much of our time and it has consequences. That lost time has consequences. So it has consequences. It has consequences because we're really inactive. We're 20% less active than the 1960s. Predicted to be 35% by 2030. And that has consequences because we're designed to be active. And that impacts our long-term health. We have less time. We're bombarded with external stimulation, so we have less time to think. So we become followers rather than curators of our life. So if we come back to productivity, if we spend all of our time on our screens, laptop screens and smartphone screens, then we're certainly being busy, but so much of that isn't productive. And it isn't actually calling upon our own skills and knowledge and critical thinking. We're just following. So we're sort of going through transactions. And that's the last thing you want to do if you want to be productive and creative.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting, this intersection between, and we're going to talk about AI as well, and that's really causing a lot of waves with all of the implications. Next question is, your journey to well-being, and you've traced the personal professional path from experienced stress-induced health issues to becoming a champion of digital detox and well-being through endurance sports. So, elucidate what's going through your head through, endurance sports and how this applies to digital detox.
So what we tend to do as humans is we think the latest thing that we've created is somehow how the brain works and how we work. But actually, we've evolved, along with all the other animals, to have this mind-body connection. So hills will look steeper to people that are tired or unfit or have a heavy backpack. So the way our brains are in a black box, they get all of their input from all of the senses. And all of those senses are coming from internally in our body and externally for external senses. So there's this connection. But our brains are probably 1,000,000 times more power efficient than the supercomputers that are running the current AI. But there is this balance because our brain consumes, I think it's something like 20% of the resources. Those resources are oxygen, so we've got to pump blood. So we've got that connection to our brains. We desperately need to sleep in order to do the maintenance on the brain and consolidate our memories. So there's this whole mind-body connection. So coming back to the endurance sport and the mindset of athletes is, that if you don't rest and recover, you're not going to be able to train. And if you've got to keep that balance and you've got to keep the nutrition side of it and the sleep side balanced in order to be able to perform at your best. Well, guess what? It's exactly the same when we're working. We can't perform at our best if we don't get enough sleep. In fact, it's quite dangerous. We can make some really silly mistakes and purchases late at night. Our ability to connect with others if we have had enough sleep is atrocious if we haven't eaten. So the connection is the fact that we've got this mind-body connection. And if we want to be productive in the world of AI, and we want to add, the bits that the AI can't do, which is the human dimension, we've got to go back and take a good look at ourselves and say, well, how do we work, and how can we work at our best? So that's the connection with the sport.
Yeah, yeah, really fascinating. The other question is, in this day and age of just cell phones pinging and social media, always checking our phones, you have this interesting idea of becoming a business athlete to enhance productivity and mental health, and the role that digital detox for leaders and managers have.
Yes, it's a business endurance athlete. You need something simple to convey a message. And the message of mind body I'm going to convey in this sort of business athlete, because if you ask anybody, well, what do athletes have to do? Well, they have to sleep, they have to eat, but it's obvious what they have to do. So I'm using that as a very easy mechanism and say, do you know what? Doing well in business is exactly the same thing. If you want to be your best, you've got to do the same sorts of things. And if you want to create teams, the added dimension of humans is human connection, which we must have. So it's a mechanism to explain the fact that we are business athletes in order to perform at our best. And people can feel good. Oh, I'm a business athlete. I'm taking a rest and recovery break because I'm a business athlete and I'm going to go and work at my best afterwards. Or I'm not going to do back-to-back Zoom calls because I know I'm to be top of my game. I'm going to do a rest and recovery of 15 minutes. And you know what? I'm not going to look at any screens. And I'm going to create some boundaries as well, because that's all part of being a business athlete. So it's that sort of easy way of explaining the mind-body connection, and the fact that we're different from computers and generative AI.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I've actually started to create boundaries and just kind of turn off the laptop, log out and put down the cell phone. And then that actually, I spend a lot of time. I love running outdoors, and I find myself with that all of that extra attention. You can go out and go for run long runs, and you can walk and experience more nature. And it's almost like you have this feeling of you're always tempted to go back, but then it's kind of like in the moment.
So
What
I think what's interesting is, and you could ask the question of people is, how much of your job do you need to do? Do you need to think? And
Yeah,
of course, most people say, well, actually, I need to think, 10% of the time, 20% of the time. Well, you know what? If you're on your screens all the time, you're not really thinking, you're reacting.
yeah.
And some people only think, because they're always on their phones, they only think, have that thinking time when they're in the shower. But luckily, I mean, for you and I, if we're walking or if we're running, that's really great thinking time.
Talk about the environmental impacts of technology, because I know especially there's a lot of concern with, blockchain mining and also AI with all that compute and, its effect on the carbon, our digital footprint and all of that. So how do we balance that?
So I wrote a paper a couple of years ago, and it was "Is our digital footprint killing the planet?" It's actually available on my website, and basically I traced everything back. If as a country you generate only 40% of your electricity from renewables, let's say, well, it doesn't matter what the claims are made by any company or any organization. Only 40% of that electricity will come from renewable sources. 60% won't. Now, the thing about server farms and modern technology is because they're at a certain stage of development, they consume enormous amounts of power. And I think I saw one reference is that data centers and the internet consume as much as the aircraft industry or the airline industry. And with artificial intelligence, because it basically they're calculating machines. And the calculations get better and better and better the more processing you add. But the more processing you add, the more electricity you need, the more heat you generate, the more cooling plants. But it all comes back to, unless you generate 100% of your electricity from everywhere where this data is coming from, then you're polluting the planet. And but we don't see it when we hold up a smartphone. We say, look, it's only a smartphone. It's got a battery. How can that be bad? It's bad from an e-waste point of view, because that's the other big problem with technology is there's mountains and mountains of e-waste. And there's more precious metals in the ground now than there is in rubbish dumps than there is in mines left to be mined.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And as we come to the end, we talked about AI and especially with Web3 and metaverse and this increasingly, we're more connected, but we're more disconnected. So how do you maintain human connection and well-being in this rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence and digital culture?
So the US Surgeon General issued a report, I think it was last year, and he said, well, we're the most connected humans ever, but we've got a loneliness epidemic. And
Yeah.
so the issue is that And certainly during the pandemic, being connected online was wonderful. There's no question about that. But connection through online means should be additional to human connection. We have to have human connection. If we don't have human connection, we can get long-term illnesses and health issues associated with it. So if it is, we have to have human connection, the only way really is to disconnect. This comes back to that bar of chocolate problem. We have to be able to disconnect. And once we're disconnected, we can choose what we want to do again. So, AI is even writing our emails for us now. So that's disconnecting us. So the words that I might send to you may no longer be my words. And when you read them, you might actually have your AI assistant read it because you get so many of these things, you only want the important ones. So online communication might become more disconnected as we go on in the future. But fundamentally, as humans, as social animals, we have to be physically connected for our own well-being. And we can only do that if we disconnect. But we still live in the modern world. We're just not connected 100% of the time.
Yeah. How can people contact you and follow you and check out your work?
So the best, now here's the irony. So I am going to say the best place to follow me is to go to my website, which is of course online, and there are free resources. There are links to some social media, but I tend not to post regularly. There's some YouTube videos, but most of them say, well, you should be disconnecting more. But I have to be online because if you're not online, do you really exist in the modern world?
Yeah, I love that. And for all the audience, let's thank Colin for coming on. Be sure to give all of his social media, like and follow on all his channels. Check out his work. Especially with coaching around mindset and digital detox. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And thanks so much for coming on.
No, thank you. It's been great.